Hey, my name is Jenny Lauren Dowden with Conduit News, and today we have Representative RJ Hawk joining us to give us his impression of session. As you know, Hawk is a representative out of Saline County for District 81 there in Bryant. Hi, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Jenny, you know what? I love it. Finally, I've only been in session. Now, this is my second session, first time on here with you, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's not for a lack of trying on my end. I know that I've asked you for an interview several times, and you have politely declined, if I am remembering correctly. Is that right?
No, that's not correct. We are scheduled. I actually said that I would do it, but I think our schedules got
You
tied up
did.
and we got busy. So no,
I'm just kidding.
no, I look at the end of the day, I love what you guys are doing. I love being able to just talk about the session, what we've done. And so anytime I can come on, be glad to.
Well, I really appreciate it. And yeah, this is your first time on Conduit. And so I know that our viewers will be interested to hearing just your overall thoughts. Correct me if I'm wrong. This was your second regular session. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so just go ahead and let us know your thoughts. Compare this session to your last. What was your overall impression so far?
I think we did a lot of good things. The one thing that was really on my mind, and a lot of the 27 freshmen in my first class, what we left the first session feeling was just, the way that session ended was just left a bad taste in our mouths. And what I mean by that is, when we suspended the rules and you had like 100 bills coming a day, and you didn't have really time to go through that. One thing I was really proud of is that this session, Speaker Evans and leadership, and then everybody in the House, we didn't do that. We let the process play out. Now, I can't speak for the Senate because they did do that, but on the House side, we let the process play out by the way the rule book was written from when we first started session. And so I really thought, for me, and I can't speak for the other 99 members, it really it slowed it down a little bit and just kept that same rhythm throughout. So where you had to go to committee, you had to give notice, you got a chance to read the bill before it got to your desk on the House floor, and you had a vote on it. And so I really think the change from last session to this session, that was probably the biggest one for me, was that in a year and a half, when somebody goes, well, why did you vote on this bill? I can actually remember a little bit rather than going, I don't remember voting on that bill, or I don't remember seeing that bill, and having to go back and look it up.
Yeah, I think so. And to that point, I've even seen recently over the past week or so, several of your colleagues say that, like, I'm really proud of our legislators there in the House. Like, this session, we did not suspend the rules because, like you said, that was a lot of constituents did not like that the last session. And then you remember a special session with FOIA. Um, it's not a good process at times. The Senate, they operate with their own set of rules. And as I was watching the Senate there towards the end, they were even getting confused themselves because they were like, wait, are we on the first second reading? Wait, what is going on? And it's
Yeah.
like, you guys are just moving through things easily. I think the speaker did a really nice job there with his first session. And so I agree with that. Let's talk about some of the bills that you sponsored. Talk to us about the ones that you were really proud of that got through.
I think the first one that took up a lot of time was House Bill 1634, which is now Act 305. And it's the Arkansas Sports Raffle Bill. And what that did was it allows for every university in the state of Arkansas to be able to fundraise, which that's what they normally do. But they're able to use money for NIL. They're able to use money for building, like if they're going to do a construction project, general revenue, without having to go back to the university and saying, hey, we need more money. Because most universities in the state of Arkansas, the athletic program is getting their money from the appropriation that is sent down by the legislature, except for the University of Arkansas. They are the only athletic program in the entire state that doesn't take any taxpayer money to run their athletic program. And so I worked heavily with the University of Arkansas on this raffle bill. But then as the bill kind of gained life, I heard from people, John Brown University, I heard from Henderson State, different people that said, we may not use this for NIL or anything like that, but we may use this to help support our baseball travel budget, right? Things like that. And, the beauty of this is it's a raffle. Our churches are already doing it. Our nonprofits are already doing it. and it's totally optional. If you don't want to participate in it, then you don't have to. And so we got that one across the finish line. I know that here in the coming weeks that I hear that we're going to see some of our first raffles at some of our sporting events across the state, which will be pretty neat to see. And so, yeah, that's the first thing out the gates. Secondly, the bill that I had a lot of constituents come to me about was House Bill 1707, and that's now
Okay.
Act 524. And what that does is if you're a mayor, if you're a city council member, quorum court, school board, sheriff, and you run for office. So just think of it this way. If you run for any type of office in Arkansas, you now have to take those election reports that like I have to do, or the governor or anybody else. You have to now file those with the Secretary of State so that anybody can be able to see those election reports. The way that it was being done previously was they would take their election report and they would file it with the county clerk's office. Well, there's some county clerks in the state that don't have an online database.
Yeah.
And so it's paper. And so this way, it just gives a more transparent look at everybody's election reports. You being in Northwest Arkansas or somebody in South Arkansas can go to the SOS website, type in a candidate's name and see their election reports.
I think that's fantastic. I think that, again, like when we talk about accountability and transparency, it just allows the public to see what is going on, even on the most local level. I don't know why anyone would be against this.
You know, I think that it's something new. I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody's really against it, but just the premise. Anytime you do something new, people are like,
Change.
oh, it's
Yeah.
change, and this is the way I've always been doing it, and this is the way I
Yeah.
know how to do it. And I think that working with the Secretary of State's office, they're going to give like tutorials, like online tutorials for candidates to be able to go to
Okay. That's
and
good.
learn how to use the system, and it's basically the disclosure portal on the Secretary of State's website. And then the county clerks also are going to help. They're not just going to say, no, we're not doing it anymore. They're going to help candidates
Sure.
navigate through those waters to get to them, because it is going to be a learning curve for people that
Yeah.
are, in your city councils or your quorum courts. And, one of the questions that got brought up. So if you're like a city council or a school board, you may not raise a lot of money, right? You may
Yeah.
raise 400 or 500 bucks,
Yeah.
right? And in the current system, the form that you fill out, you would check a box that said, I didn't raise more than $500, or I didn't raise more than 1,000. I can't remember what the number is,
Yeah.
but that box is still going to be there, right? The forms aren't changing. They're just going to be digital, and you're going to do them online rather than filling out a piece of paper, driving it to your
That's
county
great.
clerk.
That's great. That's great. Okay. A lot of conversation about the CDL bill, trucking industry. You probably, like everyone else, recently saw Trump sign an EO about this English proficiency for the drivers. A lot of conversation during session about this. I believe your bill was House Bill 1745. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Talk to us about this bill. How is it similar, possibly, if it is, to the EO that Trump just signed? Talk to us, just catch us up to speed about this, since there's a lot of conversation about it.
Yeah, so part of the bill is exactly what President Trump signed in the EO, and I like that Arkansas took a step first. It was the first state to require English proficiency in the state, and then you see just a month later, President Trump do an EO to make it across the country, and what we're finding is back in the '90s when NAFTA was created, right? That allowed for truck drivers in Mexico and Canada to drive through the United States to their point of origin to deliver goods, right? As part of the trade agreement through NAFTA. Well, you could use your home country CDL to drive into the United States. Well, so whenever I got to looking at this a summer ago, I saw that Texas had just passed a bill that made you get a work authorization form from the federal government before you drive into the country. So if you were to get pulled over, you would present your Mexican CDL along with your work authorization form to prove that CDL was accurate, right? One thing that after talking with state police and highway police that we found was there was a lot of fraudulent CDLs being produced in Canada. And so they were using the guise of NAFTA to create a fraudulent CDL to drive into the United States and then just stay. So they were finding a way to smuggle themselves into the United States, and there was no laws in place. So when Texas did the work authorization form, I got with state police, I got with the trucking association, I got with highway police and said, I think we should do that in Arkansas. And then on top of that, we added the English proficiency so that we said, okay, if you've got those two things, but you can't read a stop sign or you can't speak English, you don't need to be driving on Arkansas roads. And so we added a felony to that. So if you get pulled over and you don't speak English and you don't have that work authorization form or the work visa, you now have a felony and you get taken to jail.
Okay, so I think that sounds great. A lot of opposition though.
Yeah,
So there was controversy. There was or not an opposing bill, but a different bill
yeah.
and opposition to yours. So, why was that?
I think, I mean, I can't, I don't understand the opposition because at the end of the day, we were just cutting down on fraudulent CDLs based on what we were being told by state police and highway police, right?
Yeah.
The bill that was, I'm not going to say a companion, but the other bill was never even heard in committee, right?
Okay.
It
Yeah.
was, I saw the bill, I read, because I'm on the transportation committee. When I saw it filed, I would say that I agree with majority of the bill, right?
Yeah.
The problem though is that a lot of stuff in that bill, it went against federal law and it went against NAFTA. And so I think that when you start looking at the two, mine just all it did was cut down on foreign fraudulent CDLs and it created an English proficiency in the state of Arkansas. That
Okay.
one, it was much broader and it basically said that if you have a CDL in Mexico or Canada, you can't drive in Arkansas at all. And
Okay.
while I agree with that premise, NAFTA was already in place. We can't change that. We're only state legislators. We can't go against
Right.
federal law. And so I think that might be why it never got heard. I don't know the reasoning behind it,
Yeah.
but I do know that it passed unanimously through transportation. It got like 81 votes on the House, and it got, I think it got 34, 35 votes in the Senate.
Yeah, it did. It passed pretty easily in both. A few other good bills that you were co-sponsor of was the grocery tax, repealing the grocery tax, and then the bell to bell.
Mhm. Yeah,
So, I mean,
on
those are,
the grocery tax, Jenny, I when I first came into session, I guess 2 years ago,
yeah,
that was one thing that I was always a little confused by. Like, why do we tax necessities? Like, we've got to have water, we've got to have food. I've never understood the reason why there was a tax on something that you have to survive, right?
yeah,
And so when Representative Underwood told me that he was going to do this, I immediately told him, I said, I want in, put me on there.
yeah,
And then,
yeah.
there was some challenges that went on with that bill. I know that a lot of cities and counties, they were like, well, what if, that's a lot of revenue for our cities and counties.
They have their own.
And so what we did was, oh, I shouldn't say we, what Representative Underwood did, he just carved out the state portion of that, so the
Yeah,
state tax. So we
yeah.
cut that out, and then the cities and counties are still doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean they collect so much on the county. I mean, so they're still doing just fine. The bell to bell, I think a lot of parents and schools really appreciate that one. I know as a parent of a teenager, the cell phone is just I hate them. I hate
Mhm.
sometimes I just want to take the cell phone and just throw it through the window. I really do, and then just run it over with my car.
No, you're right. And I thought we'd hear more opposition from parents. I mean, because
Yeah,
just on the front end, I hear people go, well, I won't be able to get in touch with my kid or things like that. My first thought when I heard about this, I was like, well, when you and I were in school, if our parents need to get in touch
yeah,
with us, they called the office
yeah.
and you go
I
down the
was
office.
I mean, my parents didn't know, and again, different age. I know that like we can't really compare it, but really, and I grew up in a small town down in the Delta, but my parents didn't know where I was from sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's so much data coming out now about the phones, and we know what they're doing to our kids and their childhood and their mental and social and emotional well-being that While I think it's a slippery slope when we're choosing what all, well, you all decide to legislate. I think just keeping them out of the schools and keeping them out of the classrooms, that just makes sense. I hate that it had to go on like it had to be done on a statewide level where you're mandating something
Mhm.
rather than, letting the schools create their own guidelines. I do think that schools, you know, I think Senator D said, oh, well, teachers want us to do this so they don't have to be the bad guy. And it's like, they should be able to do it. Like but I hear both arguments, but either way, I'm totally fine with. I mean, my daughter goes to a school where they don't have cell phones, but I think it's something that needs to be done. It's a sad thing where the cell phones have just like taken over, really. So,
And I'll tell you a quick story. I got shortly before that bill passed, I got a text from not somebody in my district, but um, there were some elementary kids that they had created a quote unquote kill list of teachers they didn't like
oh
on
my
their cell
gosh,
phones. And they were sharing it on the Notes app on your iPhone. Now, these are fourth and fifth graders, right?
good
Because
night.
they were mad at their teacher because for
Wow.
whatever reason. And so they had
Yeah.
this shared, well, one of the kids' cell phones got confiscated and a teacher saw this.
Wow.
But that's what cell phones were doing. You had
Yeah.
fourth and fifth graders that were
So
carrying
sad.
around cell phones doing this in school.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's a good thing at
Yeah.
the end of the day, and we
Yeah, I
move on.
agree. I agree. Let's talk about bad bills for a second. Um, or just bills that died, but let's start with a bad bill that died. And then I'm going to let you go. Extra regulations on alcohol sales. I think that you might have been a sponsor on that one,
Are you
Hawk.
talking about the reporting bill? Is that the one?
Why, were you just trying to keep up with McKenzie's new bill of where his wines were being sold?
No, 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 no. And look, here's the thing on the wine bill. My wife, she was like, "You got to vote for that because I want to be able to get wine delivered to my house."
Y'all
Um,
just passed McKinsey's good wine bill. I'm like, and then it's like, oh, well, look at this one. We'll let it fly, but we want to know everything that's being sold and where it's going. It's like, come on.
well, and I mean, I get what you're saying. I looked at it more as we don't allow wine sales in the state, right? I'm all for wine sales in the state, right? As far as delivery. But I wanted to see how much money we were losing
Yeah,
by from Tennessee or Kentucky
yeah.
on things that were being delivered. And then I found out that FedEx and UPS already had reporting agencies and were doing it for other states. And I'm sitting here going, well, I could come back next session and say we're
Big
losing out.
Brother's over in those states. Why not just track him here in Arkansas?
Oh no, no.
Makes
I,
sense to
I
me.
get what you're saying. I totally
I'm
understand what you're
kidding.
saying.
You know that I'm giving you a hard
And
time.
and look, I can take it, but I
I know
my
you.
my whole thought on it was if we can show people that delivery of alcohol into our state is not a bad thing, right? This is how much money we're losing out on by not having some type of legislation. Then that was kind of the thought process behind that.
Sure,
It failed
sure.
miserably.
I know. I was there that day.
I think
I
you actually
watched
kind
it.
of winked at me from the gallery and said,
I
"Yeah,
did.
told you it wasn't going anywhere."
Oh gosh, hate to see that one. Okay, another bill that died that was a good bill that we were tracking, and I feel like Representative David Ray really succinctly just nailed the temperament of like how pathetic that if we can't pass this bill talking about the soda tax, phasing out the soda tax, that it does it incrementally, phasing it out over time. This simple tax cut, what are we doing? And so you were also a co-sponsor on that one as
I
well.
was the lead co-sponsor on
Are
that
you
one
okay? The lead co-sponsor,
because of the
yeah.
fact that I went to David Ray back right after the session and I said, I'm going to do this next year because, in your first year, you're just trying to get your bearings and figure
Sure.
out what to do. Um, I told him, I said, he goes, well, I've already got a plan. He goes, do you mind if I do this? And I said, only if you'll make me the lead co-sponsor on it. And so we worked together on it. And I thought it was a great plan. I thought the
Yeah.
phase out was great. But the beauty of it, and the thing that I kept hearing was you're taking money away from old people. Like I kept hearing you're taking money away from old people. But in the plan that David Ray had, we weren't taking any money away from
I
anybody.
know. Yeah.
Money was coming out of GR and it was going to go
Yeah.
right back into that.
Yeah.
And so I think that legislators, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I was really shocked how badly that was defeated
Yeah.
because I think that it was more the people, the emails and the texts that we were getting from people saying you're trying to hurt the elderly and you're trying to do this.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's not what we were trying to do at all. We were trying to get
Yeah.
rid of another tax that was not needed.
Right.
And I just think the messaging was lost
Yeah.
amongst legislators because the people that opposed the bill on the outside, constituents, I think that that messaging was so loud that it just said, okay, this is what the people want. We're not going to vote for this. And I think that's how that was defeated.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was really loud, and when I heard when I heard the debate in committee and then on the floor, I thought, wow, you can't reason with, or you can't rationalize with irrational people. And it was just the conversation, it was just so uninformed
Yeah.
about that bill. And so I'm really glad that you guys tried to run it. It was shocking how bad it failed on the House floor with, again, and I hate to say this, but like with the supermajority Republican House, and we're supposed to be fiscally conservative, and a lot of those should have known that this was just a good, simple way to phase out an unnecessary tax on our Kansans, and it failed. Okay, a few just random fire questions, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
What other piece of legislation or issue would you have liked to have seen happen that just it didn't happen this session?
So I ran a bill. It was kind of known as the expulsion bill, and I can't remember the number of it. I could pull it up later. But basically, what it did was all it said was if you transfer, right? If you're a kid and you're transferring from school to
Senate Bill
school,
482,
no, mine was a House bill.
a House bill.
That
Okay,
Yeah. And I can get it for you later after this,
okay,
but it basically what it says was that if you are transferring, right, that your
uh-huh.
disciplinary records would transfer with you,
I
much
remember that one.
much like your academic records would transfer with you.
Yeah.
But what it also did was so what I found was that let's say you are pending an expulsion, right? So you get the
Mhm.
letter from the school, it says you have an expulsion hearing on this day. Well, we are seeing parents go, well, we're not going to go deal with that. We're just going to transfer to a new school, right?
Okay.
And so they cancel the expulsion hearing when they transfer, and there's no records of anything that the kid has done when they go to the new school because the schools don't want to transfer the information. So what we were saying was that disciplinary record would transfer with you wherever you go, whether it be public or private, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And it passed overwhelmingly in the House. And we got to the Senate Ed Committee and it died a miserable death. I think I got two votes, three votes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And Stephanie Flowers started talking about how she equated it to a criminal record and that this doesn't need to follow them the rest of their life. And I told them, I said, it's only for your discipline in school. And it's not saying that a school can't, they would automatically not take you on the school choice. All it's
Yeah.
doing is giving them the information. So let's say that if you needed some special programming because you like to flip girls in the back of the head or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least the school would know how
Right.
to properly care for that student,
Right.
right? And I mean, it failed miserably in the Senate Education Committee. Or Senator Davis, she spoke for it, but then everybody
Okay.
else, they just crushed it. And so I was pretty disappointed about that one because I thought that was a pretty common sense bill
Yeah.
to protect our kids, protect our schools, and just know what you're getting because school choice ain't going away, and I don't want it to. But
Yeah.
at least schools should know what you're getting when a kid transfers into that school.
I agree. Was there ever a point in time during session where you thought, oh my gosh, like we are just spinning our wheels and we're not being very productive? Um, or
I
do you
mean,
feel like,
there's a lot of those. I think honestly, it's more in committee than it is on the House floor.
I agree with that.
You were probably, I mean, you were in House state agencies quite a bit,
I
and
was.
I call that the gauntlet of committees, and because I mean questions just it was just and at times I'm like it felt to me like some of the questions weren't even about the topic that we were talking
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah.
And so there was many late nights in that committee that I was going, what are we doing?
I
Like, what
do
are we
think
doing?
y'all's committee met the most and ran the longest out of all house committees.
I think we had 5 6 hour meetings this year, or 6 hours or
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah. They were,
Which look,
um,
that's what we sign up for. Like I'm not
no,
sitting
you
here saying,
do. Yeah.
don't have pity on me, but at the same time, like, that gets a little long whenever you're going to 10, 11 o'clock at night talking
Yeah.
about one issue that probably doesn't need that much time.
I agree. Um, who would you say, and just a few more, and then I'm going to let you go. I know you have to get going. Who would you say, is there a legislator there in the House that really surprised you, or would you say, is really helpful or gets things done that um, would surprise the viewers?
A guy that a guy that I work really well with and is Matt Brown. Matt
That's so
Brown
interesting.
and he and I socially are probably complete opposites, right?
Mhm.
But he's always willing to come and because he's a lawyer for one,
Yeah,
he's willing to help give legal advice that you don't have to go to BLR for. He's willing to help things out. Now, some of the bills he ran a lot of alcohol bills, right?
yeah,
And people they kind of frown upon that, but Matt Brown is a guy that he's always willing to help, right? And he's never going to be a guy that goes and calls you on the spot and put publicly. He a lot of his questioning that he's going to do, he's going to ask you behind the scenes and just go,
yeah,
hey, what's your thing? That way he doesn't like embarrassing people, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't see Matt Brown go and speak against at the well, very often unless he's super passionate about a deal. So, I would say him. But kind of the guy that I work a lot with is my seatmate Keith Brooks.
hmm
I don't know if you know the story, but Keith and I ran against each other back in 2020, and I lost to Keith by 21
I
votes
remember
after
that.
being declared the
I
winner.
remember that.
Yeah. And, but what, since that point, we've become great friends and, he and I work great together on a lot of things. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, between him and Matt, those are some great guys in our legislature.
yeah. Okay, one other question. It just popped in my head. There towards the end of the session, it was actually the very last day. Um, I was sitting in the Senate chamber, and I'm not going to tell you what bill it was because then it may give away the lobbyist that said this. But, and my ears are always like this. But a lobbyist said, he was talking to some other people there, not in the chamber, in the gallery. He said, for any session, whether you're a legislator or a lobbyist, this has been the hardest session I've had to work. What is your take on that? I know that this was only your second session. This lobbyist has been around for a very long time. But why do you think he said that? And what about this particular session do you think made it really difficult?
I would agree that this was a tough session. It was really tough. And the fact that mainly from my first session to the second session, I had more responsibilities, right? Because in my first year, I was on the ag committee and I was on transportation. That's all. There was some weeks neither one of those committees would meet, and I wasn't doing anything except for maybe going
Mhm.
and watching other committees. And then this go round, I was on rules. I was on state agencies. I was on transportation. I'm vice chair of audit. And so there's more responsibilities that come with that. And then I also was a mentor for Paul Childress, who came in. He replaced Lanny Fight. And so,
Yeah.
but I would also say that there it just made you question, I don't know, question or if that's the right word, but made you really have to think hard about if this is something we need to do in Arkansas or not, whether it be the ballot refer or the referendum bills for the petitions, the petition
Mm,
referendums, whether it
mm,
would be that, whether, we did affirmative action, which we passed again, which I voted for. There was just a lot, and then
yeah.
you do all that early on, and then you go towards the end of session, and then you've got the transgender bills and things that are easy for me to vote for, right? But you're getting a lot of noise and a lot of people that
Yeah.
are emailing and texting and calling and putting things on social media. One bill that I thought and I got called out quite a bit by a constituent was over an appropriation for our higher ed that we had to pass an appropriation, but he was really concerned about gender studies, and gender studies was removed with the access bill that we did early in the session. The funding for that was taken out, but because
Yeah.
people only read the headline on a Facebook post, they don't
Yeah.
look into that. And so all they see is a screen grab of RJ voted yes for this appropriation, and he sees gender studies there. Well, we're not supporting gender studies anymore because access was passed and it's not going to fund that anymore. So I think things like that, it just made it feel like a much tougher session.
Mm, yeah. I can see that. I can see that. It's a lot of well, and to that point for gender studies, I think and I've shared this, my complaint about things like that. And people know this about conduit. We don't really get into those issues, the social issues. I think Family Council does a wonderful job following those social issues. We focus on economic issues, and we'll say as long as you don't have economic freedom, you don't have social freedoms. You don't have any freedoms at all if you don't have economic freedom. And so, I'm not going to use the word pandering, but at times it feels like people will highlight those things, such as that that vote or whatever. It was like a $200,000 line item or salary, whatever, that I don't even think had been filled in a while. But yet they're radio silent on other bills that are passed and they probably voted for that have a fiscal impact of upwards of millions of dollars. And anyway, I do think it was probably a really hard session for all of you that were involved. I just thought that comment that the lobbyist made was really interesting. So
I
I
don't know
wanted
why
to
it's, I don't know
like,
why it was hard on lobbyists unless you had one of those bills. I know from a legislator standpoint, that was the comment that I got from a lot of people. It wasn't just me, that a lot of people said, man, this just felt like a grind this entire
mm,
session. And we didn't extend session, like we finished the
yeah,
same time as last time. It was
yeah,
just felt like a grind. And I think it would have had, and we started this interview by talking about suspending of the rules. Had we done that, I think that would have just put everybody over the cliff, because
I agree.
um that would have just really been the icing on the cake to go,
I
we're,
agree.
we're, we're toast.
Well, anything else you want to add? I know we've covered a lot and I really appreciate it. Anything else?
No, I mean, let's not forget the homestead tax credit was
That's right.
extended.
That's right.
And I was a co-sponsor on that as well. As a real estate agent,
Yes.
I
I
have a
had
lot of
that down
clients
to
that ask
talk
about
about.
that.
You had some real estate bills and the impact of that. We've just covered so much. And so, but yeah, you want to mention that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, we codified dual agency in this session. Jeremiah Moore ran that bill. I was a co-sponsor on it. That was a bill that we thought it was already codified in Arkansas. We were one of,
Yeah.
I believe it's like 11 or 12 states that do dual agency. And for anybody that's watching that doesn't know what dual agency means, that means that one agent can represent both parties, so the buyer or the seller, but they have to do it with consent. So
Yeah.
the buyer and the seller both have to consent to allow one person to deal with the transaction. But we found that a Fort Smith judge didn't feel that it was codified enough in Arkansas law. And so we further made sure that was a thing. Another bill that was done that did not pass was a short-term rental bill in
Yeah.
Arkansas. And I was not supportive of that bill just from a realtor standpoint. I worked with I tried to work with Representative McKenzie on some language, and I thought we got there. But the House didn't seem to like that bill either.
Yeah, and that one got me because the original one that he ran was really good. And all of the leagues came out, the municipal league and the mayors, they all came out and they were like, okay, well, if you'll just come to the table and rework it or whatever, then we'll ease up. And he brought back a whole new bill, McKinsey did,
Mhm.
and it still couldn't pass. And I think I might have, I probably did. I probably said this in the post, and I was like, this is why at times, especially with, and I don't mean to point, but especially with the municipal league and the mayor's association and all of those associations, don't go to the table at times and work with them, because more than likely they will still work against you. And, I respect McKinsey. I think that he does great work. I'm so glad that he's there in the House. He just should have kept his original bill and just fought for it. Because you look at Gonzalez's private property rights bill, that was one that they also fought against. He got it passed.
I would
And
just say that to that point on his original bill, and this is just from a realtor standpoint, right?
yeah,
I'm working with clients. This has nothing to do with politics.
yeah.
I did not like the losing of local control as far as the zoning was concerned, and here's why. Because
Losing of local control in what regard?
in as far as the zoning of where short-term rentals could go. And here's my thought process on this, right? So as a realtor, if I go and sell you a house, and
Yeah,
I get people that say, I want to buy a house, but I don't want
yeah.
there to be rental properties around this house, right?
Okay.
That I'm buying.
Yeah,
If there's no zoning for these short-term rentals, I can't tell my client there's no rental properties in this neighborhood. I can't
yeah,
tell them that, right?
yeah, yeah,
And and so I'm not doing a service to my client because I can't say, well, I don't know what's going to, but on top of that, and I believe in property rights, but what I would also say is that the other people also believe in their property rights. And so if you put let's say you go put a triplex in a nice luxury neighborhood, right? You bought a
yeah,
lot and you've got a $700,000 house and a $800,000 house, and some guy buys a lot and goes, "Well, I'm going to stick a $300,000 triplex right here." People are going to be pissed,
yeah.
and that's not right to the people around that also bought property in that area for their property rights. And so I do
Agree.
believe you got to have some zoning.
I listen, we could probably talk about this all day long. I could, I won't give examples because then it's someone who's watching this could be like, I know exactly who she's talking about. But
Yeah,
that kind of stuff happens all the time. People, invest in property and spend a lot of money and they build a beautiful home and then someone else builds, I mean, something, and it's like then their value is drives into the ground. And what are you going to do? You can't overregulate. And so I agree with you to an extent, but at the same time, I don't know. I think that the bill should have, I think that he should have kept it. And we can't continue to say local control, but then continue to take away inch by inch to where that private property owner is overregulated to where they really don't have any rights to
that's
do
right.
what they want with their land. So, I don't know. Always a good debate with you, Hawk. I really appreciate it.
That'll be the next one of these that we do.
I know. Come back and talk about it because actually, I would love to have your take on it. Washington County, and I'm sure there's so many other. I know for sure there's so many other places around Arkansas. You look at Northwest Arkansas with the way that it's growing and the infrastructure here. Do we even have the infrastructure to deal with the growth in this area. But from a real estate perspective and growth and private property rights, we could talk about this all day long. We're looking at a zoning issue here in Washington County that a lot of people don't even like, and it'll be
Yeah.
voted on in a few weeks. So we could talk about it.
We'll just do a real estate interview and you and I go for an hour. We'll do it.
Oh my gosh, people will be like, please get them off the air.
Hey, as a former media guy and you yourself doing like you and I could make conversation all day and this
I
could turn into
know.
a thing.
They would be like, you can tell that they went to media school. They're a bunch of
Yeah,
hot air.
that's right. That's right.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.